Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Ralph World. As always, I'm Mac, and with me is
Uncle Britt.
Today, we are going to be talking about something that might be a little controversial, and we might be wrong.
Jot that down.
We are going to be talking about The Flash, the movie The Flash. We've both seen it. We went together and saw it. And there's going to be tons and tons of spoilers for this. So if you haven't seen the movie, if you care, don't listen yet. Go ahead, go see the movie. Hit pause, go see the movie. We'll be here when you get back. Welcome back. Now, like I said, there is going to be nothing but spoilers in this because we're going to be talking about the movie, not so much reviewing it, just talking about what our expectations were going into it, what we liked and disliked about it, and why we think at this point it's a flop. Because the unfortunate truth is that it is a flop. So, starting off, let's talk about what our expectations were going into it. And like we talked about in the first episode when we were talking about Batman and Batmania, my expectations were nothing more than just getting to see Keaton on the big screen at least one more time. And those expectations were met. I was very excited about that. We'll talk about the ramifications of that in a moment.
Well, going into this, for continuing on from the first episode, I have since seen Batman Returns. So I do see the progression of Keaton through his actual movies into this movie. Mm-hmm. Going into it, I fully expected Keaton's Batman to be very plot important when he was involved, but I wasn't sure if it was going to be Keaton's Batman involvement or just Batman involvement, and then we got Keaton for this scene, let's do it.
Yeah.
Like you did say about the sets they recreated for it, that was all really cool. Like I knew that going into it.
The Batcave and the mansion. Yeah, it did look good.
But again, I didn't think that was going to be of anything substantial. I thought it was going to be like a passing image or everything. And what we ended up getting was a lot of interaction in those things, which was really cool.
Yeah.
But the big idea that I thought behind this movie was I thought this was going to reset the entire DCEU EU going forward, and it did. Like, especially if you get to the last scene, it does reset things, but it didn't feel like this is the turning point for the DCEU. Like, this movie happened and now everything following is going to be changed and different and new. It just felt like, well, this was the next movie in the DCEU.
Okay.
And that provides almost zero excitement for me to see where it's going to go.
Now, does you said it provides zero excitement for you to see where it's going to go. Does that mean that you have no excitement coming up for the DCU for the new relaunch when it takes place in 2025?
I gotta see it, is really what it boils down to.
I think that's going to be a big thing for a lot of people. Like, and I know we talked about this on the way home after we saw it. Yeah, we actually got to see it in the theater this time. It wasn't another Black Adam situation.
Yeah, they didn't tell us it was canceled right as soon as we walked in.
But I do think that putting all of the movies that they have left on the slate out in 2023, Fury of the Gods. Did Black Adam come out in 2020? I think that was last year, wasn't it? Okay, so Fury of the Gods, for The Flash, Blue Beetle, and Aquaman 2, The Forgotten King. I can't remember what it's called. But I think putting everything out in 2023, whether financially it works for them or not, I think is a smart move, because then once everything is done in the fall, and then Superman Legacy is coming out probably mid to late 2025, you're getting like a good year and a half at least of no DC movies. And I think what's going to happen is that's going to be a good palate cleanser for a lot of people. Because let's just jump right into why we think it's doing bad before we talk about the movie itself. And I do think that this, and even Fury of the Gods, because I just watched Fury of the Gods on Max, and I don't think that was a bad movie either.
I haven't gotten around to watching it. I do want to. I did like Shazam.
Yeah. This one, well, we're not talking about Shazam. Let's stay on Flash. But I think it has a lot of baggage. Like, it is very much attached to the DCEU, even though that was like never really the official name of it. Like, the entire third act relies on Man of Steel, a movie that came out 10 years ago. And I know there was a lot of love for that movie when it came out. There were a lot of people that liked it, but I don't feel like Man of Steel has aged well. Like, I think people look back on it now kind of like with mixed reviews, mixed feelings on it. Like, it didn't age very well. And because it's tied so much to that and what came before, it has the baggage of the reality being DC movies haven't been very good, with very few exceptions. Like, Wonder Woman was fairly well received, but it didn't really do anything groundbreaking. The Suicide Squad, the second one, Guns.
The James Gunn one?
Yeah, Suicide Squad, I think had a lot of fan appeal to it, but it still didn't do very well at the box office. And you can only blame part of that on that it was released during the pandemic. But it was like pandemic, I think that was when they were doing like theater and streaming same day release. So I think there was very much a lot of meh towards this. I also question, and this kind of ties directly back into the first episode that we did Keaton have that big of a draw? I know for me, for my generation, it probably did. But I also know a lot of my generation has family, has kids. It's more expensive for them, or they just don't want to wrangle up the family when it's going to be on streaming in a couple months, something else that we talked about. Because even our buddy Ben, he has 3 kids and a wife, and I asked him if he was going to go see it. And he was like, no, I want to see it, but I'm just going to wait for it to come out on Max. Do you think, and I don't think they would have gotten him, because I just don't think it would have happened, but if they wanted to bring in maybe an audience from the millennials, Gen Z, do you think they would have been better off bringing in Bale?
It's an interesting question.
You weren't expecting that, were you?
I was not. I'm vamping for time. Don't tell anyone. I think Bale would have brought in younger audiences because, let's be honest, almost no one my age is really caught up on the DCEU. I'm not saying no one. I'm not trying to say that. But, like, none of my friends care that much about it. If we're talking, like, a superhero marathon, we're talking the MCU.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to sit down and watch that. Or we're going to watch, like, the Sam Raimi trilogy. Like, it's very specific.
Oh, the Spider-Man movie.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Or you're just going to binge watch some phase or all of the MCU. DC is non-existent in the zeitgeist of, like, wanting to watch a superhero movie. You might have one that you might like out of all of them, like Wonder Woman or Batman or Joker, but you're not, like, there's one of those each.
Yeah.
Well, there's a second Wonder Woman. I haven't seen it, but I haven't heard great things about that.
It wasn't great for various reasons.
But you don't have much with the DC that draws people in as a community right now, outside or within the movies. But the Batman trilogy, the Christian Bale one,
The Dark Knight trilogy,
yeah, if you bring him back, it would draw people. But I also don't think there's a demand for his Batman. Like, I've not heard anyone say, oh, I want to see him come back and do it. Like, he had his trilogy.
Yeah.
There's not much left that we want to see. The one thing we really want to see was Heath Ledger again, but that, for unforeseen circumstances, can't happen.
It's pretty impossible, yeah. Yeah, because he was actually supposed to be in The Dark Knight Rises, yeah.
I don't believe he was, like, the main villain, but I think just having him in it anywhere would have been phenomenal for us, because, you know, continuing off of our first episode, that's my Joker. So I would have loved to have seen him come back. Yeah. But Bale himself, no, I don't think.
Okay.
I don't think it would have made that much of a difference.
Okay.
Because I think you're just swapping one sort of smaller audience for a different smaller audience. Well, maybe slightly bigger because it's newer, but I think you're more or less working with the same numbers.
See, I think Bale, even though nobody may have been demanding it, because at first I was going to say, was anybody actually demanding Keaton back? And I think, yeah, there are. It may not have been a large crowd, obviously, since no one's seen this movie. But I do think there was, because we never got to finish off his story. And I do think that, like, people from my generation or people that have seen Batman and Returns have wanted to like close the loop on that. But I was wondering if with Bale, since I think The Dark Knight Rises just came out like 10 years ago.
2012.
Yeah. Yeah, it was 10 years ago, 11 years ago, that Bale is still in more people's memory, in more people's like collective consciousness, that I was wondering if putting him in there, if you feel that would have put more people in seats. And you brought up the MCU, which is another point with the DC movies, is that they've never really garnered a fan base the way the Marvel movies have. And I know there's the whole like Snyderverse followings, like, you know, release the Snyder Cut, all of that. But for as boisterous as they can be, I don't think they're a huge population of it. You know what I mean? Like, DC's never created like this rabid fan base that needs to see what's coming next, what's going to happen. And it really does just go back to the quality of the movies. That things have happened in the movies that either comic book fans look at it and go like, okay, that's kind of cool, but I do not recognize this as the character that I've grown up with and fallen in love with. Maybe not fallen in love with, but like, you know what I mean, have followed, and I buy the book every month. And to general audiences, it's kind of a confused mess, because like sometimes I feel like if you don't read the comics, some of the movies won't make sense to you, because and it may just be me, but I feel like there's like little plot things that get left out of the movies sometimes that, like, unless you read the books, the comics, you may not catch certain things.
Well, I mean, they've changed overarching plots so many times that there are just flat out storylines, if you go back and watch the movies, that are literally never touched again.
Yeah.
But they keep the character, so it's like, well, is this character coming back or not? Because Wonder Woman's still here. Like, you just, at this point, it doesn't even matter. Like, you can watch any of the DC movies that are out in any order, in any preference, and they're going to tell the same story, because almost none of them are connected. You really can't even go from Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, terrible name, I'm sticking by that, to Justice League. Like, there's almost no through story between the two of them, besides what, Superman dies?
Yeah.
And then he doesn't, so, I mean, that's cool.
Yeah. The, man, I just forgot. Oh, and there's also the whole issue of, it doesn't even seem like the studio knows what's canon and what's not. Because let's take The Flash, for example. There is a moment in the movie, spoilers begin, where Batman and the bad guy, Batfleck and the bad guy, are hanging off the bridge, and they're about to fall, and then the golden lasso comes down and pulls them up, okay, and Wonder Woman saves them, which is cool, because it is kind of interesting to see the Justice League operating as the Justice League for a little bit before that gets changed. But when he has the lasso wrapped around his hand, when Batman has the lasso wrapped around his hand, and Wonder Woman says, aren't you even going to say thank you? And he says, my ego is far too big to thank anybody. And then he realizes the lasso is wrapped around, and they're trying to get it off, and she says, you know, this never gets old. The first time that happened, in the theatrical release of Justice League, it was Aquaman, when he accidentally sat on the lasso, and then he just started, like, word vomiting his feelings before he realized what was happening. And then later in The Flash, and this isn't a spoiler because this was in the trailer, when he's talking to Bruce, and he's talking about going back in time, and he says, you know, I did it once, and Bruce is like, going back in time 10 seconds is way more than like going back years upon years. The lasso gag happened in the theatrical release. Barry going back in time happened in the Snyder Cut. The lasso gag did not happen in the Snyder Cut.
Okay.
So, like, you took things from, like, the two different cuts of the movies, and it's like, if nobody saw the Snyder Cut, because, let's face it, there are people that didn't see the Snyder Cut, because there's probably people that didn't even bother having Max, may not even have Max now.
Including me. I won't watch it, at least not yet.
Or they just won't watch it. So, like, why would you do that? Why would you take, like, those two things? Like, why wouldn't you just have him realize, maybe during the opening scene when babies were being yeeted off the roof, that he does it by accident and realizes he can go back in time? You know, make that as part of that movie instead of referencing something that may or may not have happened, depending on which version of the movie you saw. And then putting in a sight gag from the theatrical release, but wasn't in the Snyder. You see what I mean? Like, it's a little messy right there.
It's just muddled.
Yeah.
You don't know which one's actually supposed to be happening, and then they reference both, and it's just like, again, nothing's connected.
Yeah.
You can watch any given property and watch another one, and it might connect or it might not. There's no through line with the DCEU movies.
No.
But for the Flash, the CGI, you just got to address it. It's not good.
No.
Like, it's not that it's so bad it took me out of the movie entirely. There were, like, really the body CGIs is what got me. Like, it just was flat. It was fleshy, like, flat. There was no detail, no grime to it. And it gave me Uncanny Valley vibes, especially the babies. And then whenever he's in his, like, chromosphere or whatever he called it.
Chroma ball,
all the people outside of it were just CG. And when it's zoomed on them and they're the background, it's fine. But whenever it was zooming into them, they looked terrible, which is weird to me because they had the actors actually do half the scenes.
Yeah, I feel especially bad for Helen Slater and Nick Cage, who were actually there doing those, and then they put that CG veneer over it. And I do want to address the CGI, because I feel like during the fights, anything to do with Batman, the Batwing in flight, Supergirl, and like even the real world final fight stuff at the end in the third act, I thought that all looked good. Now the director has said that the stuff in the time stream and the Flash point of view was on purpose, because they wanted to give it like this unrealistic look. They were going for a different aesthetic. I have a thought on that. I do believe what he is saying, but I also think that there may have been a little bit of, we're running out of time, we're running out of money, and he was like, well, we were going to do this different anyway, don't spend as much time or money on that. Just do what you can, and we'll put the rest of it. Because I have to admit, like, for the budget of this thing, I think it was like close to $3 million, you can see the money on the screen.
Oh, yeah.
You can definitely see where the budget went to on this. But I think he used his idea of doing like a stylized like flash view as a scapegoat for not having to invest into that. Whereas, like we talked about after the movie, it's 2023. Audiences are savvy as to what is a stylistic choice and what is just bad CGI. And I think he lost sight of that. That if he was going for something like that, it should have been like something that was like just hyper realistic or something, like maybe overly bright, overly saturated or something, not like you said, that Uncanny Valley look that was going on.
And not to mention, if you go to the theater right now, you could have Flash playing in one theater, and right next to it you have Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which I haven't seen it yet, but to my understanding, if it's anything like the first one, not only does it have one solid art style, but it goes into several art styles. And I don't mean for like a second. Like, it goes into substantial scenes of a completely different art style, and it still looks good through all of them. So the fact that a movie like The Flash, where I'm not saying it looks like a bad movie, it looks like a good movie. Like, the costumes are there, the CG at certain times really isn't bad. Like, the whole fight at the end doesn't look bad. Most of the things concerning Keaton don't look bad. It was really just the main character of the movie. Anything with the Flash and his world and speed just didn't carry. It just felt unfinished. But if we're jumping from that to plot, I think the plot was good. Like, I cared about Barry. I cared about what he was going through. I cared about his parents. I wanted to see what happened. That you had a villain who was introduced in the beginning who you didn't know what was going on. He's just this, like, rock dude. And then you find out through the course of the movie where he comes from, that there's a second Barry and blah, 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 and he comes back. Like, there were multiple things happening in this movie at any given time, which could be a symptom of just there's so much going on in the DCEU, we got to start explaining some of this crap at some point. But it was enough to keep me engaged at any point. And if there were flaws like, the baby CGI, once you get away from the CGI itself, like the scene is really interesting.
Yeah.
And look, one of the best jokes in this movie happened in that scene when he runs out of calories or energy and he's like, oh my God, every single baby's about to die in the most cartoonish way. And then he jumps past all of them and goes to a vending machine. Like, it had legitimately good jokes in it. I gotta give it that.
It was funny. Like, it was, I don't think because, and this is another thing that I think may put people off, that like, because of what came before, I did not expect this to be funny at all.
I didn't expect this movie to be light. And I'm not saying light emotionally. Yeah. Like, it visually was light.
Very bright. It was a very bright, colorful movie. And yeah, when his calories were running out, I was like, okay, this is going to be a beat the clock type scenario. But yeah, as soon as he jumped past all the babies and it's all happening in slow motion, and you're like, where is he going? And he lands on the vending machine and just starts housing all of this junk food, and you see his calorie count going up. That was hilarious.
And I think they landed on a good view of how the Flash's power works in that movie. Like, as his energy's running out, things are starting to catch up to him. Things are getting faster. Things are going. But then when he started eating, once he got like 2-3 bites in, things started slowing down again, and you could tell he was getting faster.
Yeah.
And that carried through most of the movie. When he slowed down, everything else started catching up.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a great way to show his power, because it stands out not only in DC, but it's separate from how they show it in the MCU.
Because with Quicksilver, especially in the X-Men movies, it was either like all or nothing, wasn't it? And like, even he wasn't really moving in real time during those things. Like, he was moving slow, but like the environment was moving slower. Whereas in this, like, it felt like Flash Barry was like moving at like normal speed a lot while everything was slowing down. It was, I wasn't expecting it to be funny at all. I think I'm very interested that you said you liked the story, because it is based very heavily off of Flashpoint, something that we talked about. It makes it a much more personal story arc by just reducing it to the characters you have. Because in Flashpoint, the entire world is screwed up. Atlantis is fighting the Amazons. They've taken over Europe. Like, it's this world-spanning thing that kind of, in the book, gets a little muddled. I actually think this story worked better as a more personal story. Because then he, like, when it's just focusing on Barry and Bruce, and they're talking about, like, the loss of parents and what it did to them, it makes it even that much more heartbreaking at the end when he has to make the choice that, like, nobody should have to make. Like, I saved her once, but I can't. Like, when we're talking about his mother, because, like, when he goes back in time to, like, save his mom, and then at the end of the movie, he realizes he has to go back and undo it. Like, how do you do that? I also feel like, and it's interesting that we keep making the parallels to the MCU, that I think another thing that's like an anchor around the DC movies' necks is that they always seem to be chasing the last big thing. Like, if you go back to Man of Steel, okay? Man of Steel came off of the success of the Nolan trilogy, which was very grounded, very gritty. We call it, like, it was one of the things that brought up the term grimdark, okay? And they wanted Nolan to take over the DC universe. He was actually picked, I think, to be director of Man of Steel before Snyder. And he said, I'll be a producer on it, but I don't want to do this anymore. So, like, he was a producer on Man of Steel. So Man of Steel had very much like that grim, gritty, grim, dark feel to it, the muted color palette. And it was also very heavily based off of everything from the colors to Superman's uniform, based off of the New 52, an event in the comics that was coming to an end because it was kind of losing the comics money at that point. Like, in the New 52, that Superman was literally killed in continuity, so they could just say he's completely gone, and then they brought back the original Superman. He showed up with a beard and his regeneration suit and everything. So they did it because of something that had already come before in movies and comics. And then Wonder Woman, which is arguably one of the better movies, I mean, let's face it, it was Captain America.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I love that movie, and as much as I love the way they told that story, and I can kind of see where they're coming from, because Wonder Woman and Cap both were very popular around World War II. They both fought the Nazis.
Hero out of time trope.
Yeah, because they even said when they did it in World War I, they purposely set it back to the First World War rather than World War II when she came out in the comics, because they didn't want it to be an exact copy of Captain America. But still, the comparison is there. Mm-hmm. Batman v Superman was an answer to Civil War. Like, even this, The Flash, multiverse. Granted, DC did it first, and in the comics I still think DC does it best. But you've had No Way Home. It came out the same time as Spider-Verse, and it's just another multiverse movie at this point. Which it is more than that, but I just have this feeling the general audiences are just viewing it as just another multiverse movie, especially with the other additional problem of the CW did it better with their Crisis on Infinite Earths. I really feel like the CW did it better when you saw the multiverse than what the Flash did. And I get it, you don't want to do it exactly the same way that the Arrowverse did it with Crisis, because then it would be saying, oh, you just copied Crisis. But when they showed all of the worlds colliding, and the people that were there weren't really doing anything except for that one version of Superman that we'll talk about in a second. I liked being able to see Christopher Reeve's Superman and Helen Slater's Supergirl on screen at the same time, bad CGI or not, because that was something I never got to see. But did anybody other than me care?
Yeah, all those little cameos were great at the end, but they were pointless.
Mm-hmm.
Almost the entire... actually showing us anything from the other universes were pointless.
Mm-hmm.
Having Keaton Batman, that made sense, because, that's the universe they're in, we're going to explore this universe. Mm-hmm. And even with that, it was very much not Tim Burton's universe.
Right.
It feels like Tim Burton's Batman and everything, but it wasn't his universe. Yeah. It wasn't his feel. It wasn't his world. Mm-hmm. But it was very clearly the same Batman. Almost like when Flash messed everything up, that Batman just kind of shifted into another one rather than that world shifting into theirs.
Okay.
So he had substance in the movie, and then you had all the other cameos and the other characters that just straight up didn't.
Yeah.
Christopher Reeve's Superman and his Supergirl, they were on screen together. That's literally it. That is literally all they did, were be on screen together. Then you had the OG Flash, which you said you think it's from the Flash show.
No, he was a completely... I looked that up after we saw it. He was a completely CGI render. He was a completely CGI character. That he looked like the original Jay Garrick Flash from the Arrowverse, but it wasn't him. It was just a completely CGI construct. And when I found out about all those cameos, and unfortunately, as much as I tried to avoid spoilers, the one spoiler that I did find out prior to going in, which I'm kind of upset about, remember, this is a spoiler-laden review, or discussion. The one spoiler that I did find out about that I would have loved to have just been able to experience in the theater was Nick Cage showing up as Superman. And when I found out about that, and I knew there were cameos in it was just a given that there were going to be cameos in this. I was expecting them to be a little more interactive. I was expecting it to be, okay, you have this army of Kryptonians, maybe they just open up the multiverse. Yeah. And all of these others just come in. You have all... could you imagine just, an army of Supermen? Being led by Nick Cage?
Yeah. like you just have Nick Cage, Superman show up. Like you have the Flash from the show up. Like you don't need the whole Arrowverse. I understand that's gotten in depth, but you have Flash. You know, the other Flash that's in the popular culture right now. Yeah. Who Ezra Miller did a cameo on the show for
in Crisis. Yeah, like there was like a backdoor way to get that in right there. It would have explained that brief cameo in Crisis on Infinite Earths. And then like so you have Cage show up as Superman, and then like you have these other Supermans that are like just there but you don't really focus on it. And then maybe, and I know this is totally copying Endgame, but you could even do something brief where like you have Reeves and Helen Slater. And you remember how when Stark and Pepper were back to back in Endgame and they're spinning and just shooting? Imagine those two doing something similar to that, and they're just like eye blasting everybody.
No, like, it would be cool.
It could have just been something brief like that.
And actually, I just thought of this.
I actually just got chills thinking about that. I'm not going to lie.
Look, there's a tagline we came up with before we ever started this podcast, and it's, we could probably do it better than that. I'm just saying. But you just saying that gave me the idea. We could have like an endgame moment at the third act of the Flash movie where Reeves, Keaton, just all these characters come out, and then you can make it devastating by they all still die. Like, it doesn't matter how many people you bring up. Like, in the context of the movie, that is a point that just will always happen. In this world where Superman isn't alive, this is how this is going to end every single time. So you can bring in all these other Supermen, Batman, Flashes, whatever, and then you could just have this great moment of triumph where they somehow get them all there, followed by like 5 minutes later, you have all these iconic characters just straight up dying and losing, and you have the Flash like, I can't fix this.
And I think that's actually a very good point. I think that, because then if you have like all these multi-dimensional portals opening, you have all these Supermen and these different Flashes and all these other heroes coming through, and then you'll be sitting there and you'll be thinking, okay, this is really cool, but this is really just Endgame. But then Zod wins no matter what. Like, and that's where it diverts, that like he's going to win every time no matter what. And like I think that, and yeah, because you would still need that moment of Barry realizing, I have to go back and set this all right.
And you still keep like that moment with Keaton.
Yeah.
Like Keaton should still be the fixture for all this, where he's like, I tried to save you, Bruce, I did. And he's like, it's fine. Like, this is how it's going to happen. I'm okay with it going out this way. And Barry realizes, like, crap, it's okay for things to end. Not that he wants it to. Yeah. But I also think that would tie into the villain a lot more, like the Rock villain. So Evil Barry, his whole motive is that he's the, quote unquote, the fake Barry who stayed and kept trying to change it and change it and change it. Yeah. You can keep that exactly as it is, because as he's sitting there trying to change it, that's where all the other people are coming from. Every time he changes it, he's enveloping another world into that moment. Yeah. And then that's how you have Barry fully realize, like, Jesus, this isn't just destroying my world, this is destroying everything. Yeah. Not just the universe where my mom's alive, not just the universe where like I grew up in a normal house. Yeah. But everything. Yeah. All the other good universes, the bad, everything is just imploding in this one moment, and it comes down to I have to kill my mom. Like because you can paint it any other way, but in his head that's what it is. Like, I have to kill my mom. Yeah, because realistically he's not killing his mom. No. He's letting his mom die. There is a very good distinction, but I think you're absolutely right. In a son's mind, it would be, I have to kill my mother. And I actually, getting away from that that plot point, that thought experiment, I actually, the Dark Flash thing, that I can't remember if he was in any of the trailers, but there was like the figures and the statues and everything, so I was aware of him before we went into the movie, and I was like, I wonder where this is going, where this is coming from. I kind of had a feeling of what it might be, that in the comics there is this villain called Reverse Flash, and it's like somebody from the future. The whole connection between Barry and Reverse Flash is very complicated, and it really depends on which continuity you're following.
but I thought he was going to be some version of that because he played a very important role in the original Flashpoint. What they did with him in this, from the moment he first jumped out and pushed Barry out of the time stream, when they brought him back at the end, and movies in general tend to do this, that like the true villain doesn't show up until the end and blah, 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 blah. And then it's like you have no connection to this. You don't really care about this. That was one of my big problems with Wonder Woman, was that like Ares, the god of war, just ended up being a generic thing at the end. For the fight.
CGI monster trope at the end of movies is killing me.
Yeah.
Like we can talk about that at another point, but that is a legitimate thing happening a lot. Like, you watch a movie and then just in the third act, oh, hey, yeah, you've been following this plot, CGI monster.
Yeah. But with this, even though the Dark Flash was a CGI construct, I didn't feel like he came out of nowhere, because once you realized who he really was and what he was doing, you realize you've been watching him the whole movie. And you can understand his thought process, especially when he says, I've almost figured it out. And Barry says, how long have you been here? And he says something vague like time has no meaning or something like that, meaning that he has no idea how long he's been doing this. And I thought that was a very interesting twist on the trope of, here's the monster, you thought you knew who it was, to you've been with him the whole time, you just didn't know it. I kind of liked that. I kind of dug that, because I thought in any other movie, I feel like what would have happened was you would have seen him become the Dark Flash in front of you. And like you sort of did when he started having the pieces shoved through him and you were able to piece together what was happening. But the fact that all three of them were on screen and both Barrys, realized who he was at the same time, and the one that eventually becomes him, the horrified look on his face when he realizes this is what I've been doing. Like, I thought that was I liked that. Like, I'm not saying I was taken completely by surprise that it was some version of Barry, but I liked how they had that reveal. I thought that was a nice touch.
Now, I know you'll recall this. When we were watching it, the only relative story to this that I've seen is Crisis on Infinite Earths. So I am aware of Reverse Flash, and that's who I thought that dude was when we first saw him kick him out of the bubble. I was like, okay, Reverse Flash. I also thought that was going to be who killed his mom, because that's what my assumption was, because that whole plot thread was just left hanging.
Well, I think in Flashpoint, because I know in the TV show, it is Thawne, it is Reverse Flash that kills the mother, because he triggers. That's what I mean. Like, I can't remember in the comic because it's been so long since I read it and I just don't have it anymore. I can't remember if it was the Eobard, the Reverse Flash, or not. But in the movie, the animated movie, in the Arrowverse, and so I'm going to assume in the comic, Reverse Flash is the one that kills Barry's mother, because he has to set him on the path of becoming Flash. Like, that was the whole impetus. That this, like, Dark Flash is kind of the reason the mother has to die, but, like, it's not a direct hand. Like, he doesn't go in there and, like, just flat out kill him. And I don't mind that they don't reveal who the killer was. No. I don't mind that was left a mystery for this. I thought, like, if they would have figured it out, it would have been like, well, then why don't you just stop that guy? You know what I mean? Like, instead of, like, putting the tomatoes in the cart, why don't you just, like, make sure that guy doesn't get to her? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I don't mind that they still didn't figure it out. No,
I didn't hate it, but it just was something left open.
Yeah.
But this movie, if we're excluding Keaton for a second, this movie really was just for lack of a better term, a psych eval of the Flash.
Oh, yeah.
That's really what it comes down to. All the CG aside, all the powers aside, like, it was this guy's therapy, really. And it wasn't just this one Barry. It was two different versions of the same character, and then two different versions of Batman. And the reason I'm bringing up Batman is because I thought of this like 5 minutes ago. When Bruce there's two of them. When Batflack says to Flash in the beginning, like, he really is just, like, remorseful about everything. Like, I became Batman in the hopes of maybe bringing my parents back. But at this point in the story, he's like, look, man, I am Batman at this point. I'm not going to stop. But I have regrets. Like, I should have done things differently. And then you jump, like, an hour later in the movie, and the Flash is with a new Batman, and then says the exact same thing to him. And it hits 10 times harder when Keaton says it. And I don't think it's because one Batman gets it more than the other, or one Batman it delivered it better or anything. I think it was just at that point the Flash was like, the first Batman was his friend. That's how he viewed it. So it's easy to write off a friend's kind of advice to just be like, you don't get it. I know who you are. Yeah. And then you get this familiar guy who you trust, but very clearly completely different entity who says the exact same words to you. It just rings true on a whole new basis. And he's like, you know what? You're right. And it doesn't hit all at once or anything. It takes a lot more. It takes the other Barry. It takes evil Barry. Like, it takes everything for him to finally get it. But I like that the movie focused heavily on having two Barrys. I thought that would have gotten annoying very fast. But I think the bounce back and forth between the main Barry and new Barry, with the main Barry having to just actually figure this out. He's by himself. He needs to solve this, whereas the other Barry is the Flash that we've come to know in these movies. He's very sarcastic. He's very fast. He's very, I don't want to say witty, but like just always going on about something. So much to the point that he actually starts to annoy main Flash. And he's like, dude, just shut up. Like, I'm trying to solve something. And the other one's like, I don't understand why you're being mean to me. Like, you got me here. I'm here because of you. And it's just this fight between the both of them and not telling the new one why he's there. And then the heartbreaking scene of him accidentally hearing that his mother died and everything. Like, from every point in this movie, you have a Barry experiencing something and then you have a Barry reacting to something. And I think that is such an interesting take. They could have done a lot more with the dichotomy of it, but I just love the concept of one Barry going through something and having a realization, and then the other Barry going through the exact same thing and having a completely different realization, and then the two of them are like realizing things separately, but because they're doing it together, they're getting a more evolved experience from it because they're seeing how basically me would react if I was slightly different. And that was my favorite part of this movie.
And it's interesting you say that because I thought I was going to hate that too, because that does not happen in the comic. That does not happen in the original story. Barry just shows up back in the future, and because his mother never died, he never became a police forensic. Or he did, but he was never in the lab when the accident took place, so he didn't have his powers. He didn't have his speed powers, which is why he had to do the electric chair experiment to get his powers back, which I was really impressed that they did that in this movie. And I thought, why are they putting two Barrys in here? This is going to get annoying. But it actually worked. I thought it worked out fairly well. Now, let me ask you something about this. There was one channel I was listening to that was talking about The Flash a couple weeks ago. And they were talking about it. And they said the second Barry took them out of it because you could always tell when one was deep faked. I thought that CGI was actually pretty good. Could you tell a difference?
I mean, I'm not going to lie. I am one of those people when it comes to CGI where I look at where the CGI is touching something real to see how bad the discrepancy is. It is a terrible habit. I genuinely hate that I do it because more times than not, it just takes me out of whatever I'm watching. Because I'm solely looking like, how does his hand interact with the table he's touching? And half the time it's not well. But in this movie, like, I was looking at their faces. I knew at certain points it wasn't going to be the same person in two places at once.
Well, it was a body double through the whole thing.
But I never thought the faces or anything caught me off guard or anything. Like, there was a lot of scenes where they even spun around both of them at the same time, and it didn't catch me off guard or take me out of it or anything.
No, it was nothing like what we talked about when he was in like the Speed Force or in the Speed Zone or something. Like, I thought I thought the two berries and the face work, I thought was actually one of the better things that they had done effects-wise. It's also interesting to me that you said that like this whole movie is a psychosis or like a psychotherapy for him, because I thought another thing that might be holding this movie back, for people caring to see this movie, is the Flash had no character until this movie.
Oh, yeah.
He just showed up in Justice League. I think that was the only movie he's been in.
Yeah, he was the funny speedster.
Yeah, he was the funny speedster. He didn't have much of a character. There was like really no backstory to him. And depending on which version you saw, he wasn't really that funny. Well, truthfully, both versions, he wasn't really that funny. But like the Flash had no character. Like they needed to I think this is where DC made their big mistake with the movies, that they tried to jump right to Justice League. Marvel establishing all of the characters, especially Thor, Iron Man, and Cap, the three main ones. Like you can, and even the smaller characters you introduced in other movies, Hawkeye, Black Widow, things like that. Hulk didn't show up until the Avengers, but he had...
That was an out-of-studio issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, when you got to the Avengers, you didn't have to flesh out these characters. You already knew who they were. You already knew how they should react to certain things. Whereas, like, just jumping into Justice League, yeah, you had Superman and Man of Steel. You had Batman and, to a point, Wonder Woman in Batman v Superman. Then you had Wonder Woman in her movie, which I can't remember if her movie came out before or after Justice League. I think it was before. But then when you got to Justice League, you had Flash, you had Cyborg, like you had other characters involved that like weren't fully fleshed out and could have absolutely benefited from having their own movie. Like, they should have held off Justice League.
Oh, yeah.
They should have had the Flash movie, the introduction of the Flash movie. They should have had Cyborg's introduction movie. Those big characters that are like the big members of the team shouldn't have just been like that was their first exposure. Like I said, and if you have other ones of the team that you're going to want to bring in, somebody like Black Widow, somebody like Hawkeye, you bring them in as side characters in other movies. It just... because Justice League didn't really give you a chance to get to know them, and that's why, like, I think when the Flash movie came out, general audiences were like, the last time we saw him in a movie was, what, 5-6 years ago in the theatrical release of Justice League? What do we care about this?
Not to mention, anything that came from those movies really, again, didn't lead into this movie.
No, and there was just like a lot of baggage with it, which is unfortunate because I do think it's a good movie. Like, we both liked it. Now, as far as like Keaton goes, I was very excited when Keaton came out. We're going to talk about this for a second. That when we saw the mansion, when he went into the mansion, and you saw all the suits of armor from like Batman, like the '89 Batman and Batman Returns, and it had that gothic feel to it, I was already getting like excited. I was getting pumped up.
He was getting giddy. Don't let him downplay this. He was getting giddy.
And when Keaton came on screen, what I meant to do was just reach over and like slap Brittany's knee or like hit him on the leg or something and be like, it's him, it's him, it's him. What I ended up doing was just full on punching him in the nuts.
Yeah, Keaton... See the movie, you'll know the scene we're talking about. Keaton jumps out of a cabinet, swings around, starts beating the crap out of the Flash, and Max's fist beat the crap out of my right nut. So that was a really cool moment. And I even later expressed to him that in that moment, when he was just getting giddy and excited about this character, and, you know, he thought it was someone else, I'm sure he'll explain in a second, he was just trying to talk to me and be, you know, a good friend and, like, express his excitement. I was writhing in anger. I was in pain and misery, and I wanted him to shut up. But we got through the scene, and it was all right, but there was some anger during the Flash, all right?
I didn't mean to do that. I think that should go without saying. That was an accident. But what I thought was going to happen was when they were talking about all the cameos, and when we saw the original trailers, if you've seen the trailers, you know what moment I'm talking about, when the bookcases part and all the bat suits are in there. In the trailer, there's somebody that you only see from behind, and they're wearing a sweater, and they have long curly hair that I thought was blonde in the trailer, but in the movie it's obviously not. And I thought it was blonde, and what I thought one of the cameos was going to be was Michelle Pfeiffer coming back as Catwoman, and like turned out that like Bruce and Selena got married. That's what I thought was going to happen. So when he jumped out and it was just long hair and that sweater, at first I thought that was Michelle Pfeiffer. I had my hopes up about that, and I punched Brittany in the crotch. Later found out she was not in the movie at all, which was kind of disappointing to me, because I think I had gotten my hopes up that she was going to be in the movie, because then if you put those two together, you have the possibility for Helena Wayne, who was the original Huntress, that would have just been awesome, but that didn't happen.
Like I said, sometimes we could have done it better. But the Keaton of it all, man, he was great in this movie. He was the right amount of camp and seriousness to follow through with the old movies.
Yes.
And like I said, I just watched his two movies. Just watched them within a week apart of each other, and then saw this movie. So I have a pretty fresh grasp on what his character felt like going into this. And it felt like Keaton's Batman through and through. Like, it felt like Keaton, and then it also felt like The Flash. Like, it felt like two separate entities came together and still existed separately together. And I gotta say, man, I know Batfleck was in the beginning and he had his, chase scene and was taking them down. Irrelevant for Keaton's Batman scene. Like, they go to, a Russian, Antarctic base to release Superman.
Oh, yeah.
And let me tell you right now, the Flashes did nothing in this scene, okay? Batman got there. Batman got them there, found the location, beat up almost every single person in the location, and didn't just beat them up. Like, I'm pretty sure half of them died accidentally through his fists.
Accidentally through his fists.
Then they finally get to Superman. It's not Superman. It's Supergirl. And Barry's like, oh yeah, I'll still take her out. I'll be nice. And then you know what Batman does? Batman beats the crap out of some more people and then carries the other Flash who got shot in the knee and still beat up people. Like, Keaton went hard in Russia. That's all I'm saying.
But, one of my favorite things, there's two things that of my takeaway from that whole encounter, that whole part of the movie. I loved when it all started and it the Russian mercenaries are on the ground and they're pulling guns on the Flashes, on the two Barrys, and the camera pans up, the Danny Elfman theme swells, and you just see him standing there, and it zooms in on him, and he says, "Oh, this is gonna hurt." He acknowledges that he's been out of it for too long, and I really liked that. And I also liked, after they got Supergirl out, how the chef showed up and Keaton did the foot stomp to try and spook him, but it didn't do anything. And he was like, wait a minute, this usually works. And he tried it again. Yeah, that's what I think you mean by it had the perfect amount of camp to sort of ground him, which is something that a lot of Batman movies don't do anymore. We said I mentioned in the first episode, I think I said this, that when Keaton was Batman, it was before Batman had to be perfect at everything. And I was really glad to see that still carried over into this movie. I was glad to see that, things didn't always work out exactly how he planned them. But a lot of the stuff he was just making up on the fly.
And that is a far more interesting take for Batman, is that it doesn't matter what happens. He doesn't need prep time, as everyone likes to joke about.
Yeah.
It's that he can adapt so well and so fast to situations. That's what makes him angry. Not that I'm going to go down to this
Rabbit hole?
Rabbit hole, but like it's a similar concept to the Doctor from Doctor Who. He has this saying at one point is you never put him in a corner by himself.
Yeah.
And it's because like that's when they're at their best, when they have nothing to go off of and they have to rely on themselves. That's when they do their best work. And the same for Batman. He couldn't really rely on the Flashes because at that point in the movie, the one character who knew how to use the powers didn't have them.
Who had the experience, yeah.
And the one who had the powers sucked. Like at that point.
Yeah.
He just sucked.
Yeah.
But that's another point where there was a really funny joke when he gets shot in the knee and he gets on the elevator and you just hear him, I need this knee.
We set it up like, we got to set it up like the Barry that has the powers, who is like the younger Barry Allen, who just got the powers and has no experience, got shot in the knee by one of the Russian mercenaries. And he looks at the other Barry and he says, "You didn't tell me we could get shot." And Barry says, "Why would you think we couldn't?"
If you need to know anything about our friendship, me and Mac walked out of the movie theater and pretty much looked at each other at the same time and was like, yeah, you know, if we were superhero, we would be both of the Flashes, like at any given point. I would see myself saying, I didn't know we could get shot. And I can also see myself looking at myself going, why wouldn't we?
Yeah.
But,
well, no, and sort of going along with the whole, he's making it up as he goes along. Something else that I like is when they finally got back to the surface, before Supergirl got her full juice, her full power, like both Barrys, one Barry with the speed was shot in the knee so he couldn't run, and the other depowered Barry was on the ground with the Russians standing over him. And he says, "Batman, what do we do now?" And the only thing Bruce can say is, "We try not to die." Like, because you can just picture that, like, he's just making this up as he goes along, which leads to one of the coolest reveals in the movie.
So this shot in this movie, personally, is my favorite scene of the movie. Favorite shot.
Oh,
favorite
really? Was
moment,
it?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's, you know, if you're watching this, you're either going to see or have seen the movie, so you know the scene I'm talking about, or you haven't seen the movie and don't care. So I'm going to describe the scene for you. It's that scene that he just described, but the camera's zooming up on Batman, like from the waist down, it's going up, and you kind of get to his hand, and he's holding it up because there's guns around him, and as the camera gets to his hand, he makes a fist, like he makes it tighter, and then his hand moves out of the way, and right behind the fist, floating in the air, is Supergirl in her, like, robe, like surgical
straitjacket, I think it was, basically.
And she's just floating in the air, and it's not like up and powered, it's like head to the side staring down, and then you get like a second and a half of her sitting there, and then she just starts straight murdering all of them. You can say whatever you want, she murdered them.
Oh, no,
like she was throwing them off the building, punching their heads into the cement.
She absolutely did. And like in the Flashpoint storyline, I think I explained this to you before, that like she takes place of the Superman that's like of Project Superman. So when they got her out of the prison that she was in, that was completely lightless, and then you would even see like the red sun radiation generators start up. When they got her to the surface, and I was just sitting there, I was anticipating, and I was like, she's going to get in the sun, she's going to get in the sun, she's going to get in the sun. And when they dropped her because they got attacked, like Barry didn't drop her on purpose, like he got tackled and she fell out of his arms.
Wasn't it the explosion?
Oh, yeah, no, the explosion threw them, that's right.
Which is another improv scene with Batman, because he put a bomb underneath the thing to get him out, and he's like, how much do you guys weigh?
Yeah. Oh, when he pulled out that little tape measure.
Oh my God, the tape measure was so funny. He pulls this bomb out, sets it, puts it underneath, and then he pulls the second item out, and you're thinking like, what could this be? A bomb? A gun? Tape measure.
But when she started taking in the sun radiation, and like you saw like the muscles starting to form up in her arms and everything, and I was like, you almost got hit a second time, I'm not gonna lie. I actually restrained myself on that one.
Thanks, thank you.
But no, like even in Flashpoint, when that moment came with Superman, with Kal-El, he was still just killing people. And a large part of it was because they had been imprisoned. Like I'm saying they, meaning either the Superman or the Supergirl, depending on which version of the story you're following. they had been imprisoned all their life, and they were nothing but angry at that point. It's like, what would you do? Like, they didn't have, they didn't come up on the farm with Ma and Pa Kent. All they knew was these people have had them trapped for maybe decades. Now I can shoot fire from my eyes. Somebody's paying a price. Because especially that one dude that she just threw, and like you just saw him, off the mountain. He's not coming back.
And I might be wrong, but I'm fairly certain she like grabbed that guy, hit other guys with that guy, and then threw that guy. So
like when she landed and did the backwards power slide in the straitjacket, that was just power right there. That was a great moment. And then when you saw her in the full suit, like I wasn't a fan of that suit. I thought it was like too blue. I know that sounds stupid, but like it needed a little bit more red, I think, just to break up the blue. But like when she was in the suit, like you really believed she was like flying, that she had this strength, that like just from the way that she was poised and holding herself, like, and even in flight, like it wasn't just somebody was like flat with their arms out. Like she was moving, like she pulled her arms back and then like sprung forward to like, break the sound barrier. I think the only disservice, and it was just the nature of the plot of the story, she just kept dying though. Like I really was hoping she would get another shot and they would bring her into the new series of movies and maybe she could be the Supergirl for the new series of movies. But the last time we saw her, Zod killed her. Like, and it can be very well argued that she had only been in the sun. She had only been out of captivity for like a couple of days. So like it's a given that she wasn't at full power. But at like the same sense, like, because I was getting really hyped when she was just smacking Zod around. But then like every time they tried to do a reset, like she just kept dying. And it was like, if they take this Supergirl moving forward and put her in the DCU, like, how are people going to view that? Like, well, the last time I saw this one, she kept getting killed. Like, what do you think of that?
Honestly, I equate that not so much as like a power scaling fight, like, oh, Zod was stronger than her, so he won. I think it very much came down to, like Keaton said with the noodles, like there are just fixed points. And weirdly enough, to go back to Doctor Who, that's what they call it in there. There are fixed points in time that you cannot change. No matter what you do, this will happen. And I think that's what that came down to me. Like it never was a, well, she sucks, she's weak or anything like that. It was just like, she has to die. Like she could have literally been any character. Like, she has to die here. This is what just has to happen here. And then, at the end of the movie, the Flash resets it anyway. So, like, that Supergirl could very much still be in that world. Just, we don't see her at the very end.
Yeah. But
I think, I absolutely loved her as Supergirl.
Oh, yeah.
I loved her. I loved the portrayal. Her meeting with Zod, after she had her whole, like, humans aren't worth saving, I'm not going to help you guys, and then she turned around and was like, you know what, the Flash helped me, at the very least I can help him, and it's the stepping stone to get her to where she needs to be character-wise.
Right.
But one of the few things you learn about the character in the beginning is that her sole intention was to be sent to Earth to protect Kal-El, Superman.
Well, that's a point of Supergirl, no matter what content.
Well, yeah, but just getting that in the movie, concreting it that's her purpose there.
Yeah.
And then you find out that Superman never arrived, you don't know where he's at, and the first thing she asks Zod when she goes up to him face to face is, where is he?
Yeah.
And Zod kind of doesn't answer it at first, and he's, beating around the bush, and then she just gets angry and is like, where is he? What did you do?
Yeah.
And he's finally like, the baby didn't make it, and she flips.
Yeah.
Phenomenal, dude. I loved watching her go ape on this dude.
That was the first time she I-beamed anybody, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was the first time she used the heat vision.
Because I don't even think she realized she really had it up until that point, because I'm pretty sure something similar happened with Clark in Man of Steel, where he got angry, and that's what started it. But her going ape on Zod and just beating the crap out of him was fantastic. But it then led to her dying, no matter what. But the first time she died, I really liked, because it was pure hubris that killed her.
Oh, yeah.
Like, she beat Zod and everything with the pole, like, into the ship and, like, indented him. But he's very clearly not dead.
And she turned her back on him.
Yeah, and she walked over, grabbed his arm, and is, like, I'm assuming looking for confirmation on Superman. And then she gets stabbed from his other hand, and that's how she dies the first time. That made sense to me. Like, she's blinded by anger and everything. Not to mention, this is the first time she's been outside of they called it a scrotum, didn't they? Outside of the metal scrotum.
It's like a giant metal scrotum.
This is where you keep Superman, in a scrotum?
And let alone, like, her first time fighting Kryptonians at that power level. Yeah.
Like, I think it is an issue that we did just see her die and then die, because that really is going to be the image you take away from it.
Yeah.
You can have parts that you liked with her, but at the end of the day, you're just going to remember she died and died and died and died and died. I really, really hope she comes back somehow. I just really enjoyed her take on Supergirl.
This version of Supergirl, visually, I feel like she's based off of, I forget what her name is, but it's not Kara. Visually, she looks like the character that is the Supergirl that in an alternate timeline, in another Earth, whatever, she's the daughter of Lois and Clark, and I forget what her name is. So everybody, when they saw her before, like, anything was known about this movie, just when they saw who was playing Supergirl, they saw her in the costume, and the short hair, the structure of her face, she looked like the daughter of Lois and Clark from this other Earth. But she is Kara, and I thought that was interesting because Kara has traditionally been blonde hair, pale skin, long hair. So it was kind of cool seeing this different take on her. And I think this was a really good rendition of Supergirl. Don't get me wrong, like, I really enjoyed Melissa as Supergirl in the series, but I would definitely love to see her get another shot at playing the character, because she did have that ability that, even though she was the smallest one on the screen, she had that ability, especially once she was in the suit. And I get that the suit might have been padded up a little bit, but, like, she exuded, like, this aura of strength around her that I feel like is kind of hard to do if you can't put yourself in the mindset of, I have the power of a god and I'm walking among humans. You know what I mean? Like, I think she portrayed that very well, but still was able to have, like, those little flirty moments as well, like, to, like, humanize her and ground her, and, like, that she does care, especially, you know, about Barry, because one of the things that ties together, when they rescued her, and Barry, the main Barry, was carrying her, and he says, "I've got you," and he's carrying her in her weakened state through the underground tunnels of the Russian complex.
While Batman is laying down the law,
yeah,
remind you.
Later, when they try and do the lightning strike experiment with the chair, and the first strike doesn't work, and then in the comic and in the animated movie, they just did a second strike. In this, like, the equipment was burned out, and, like, Barry's sitting there convulsing and coughing up blood. It was kind of like a gruesome scene, a gruesome moment.
Like, it was 100% not enough experiment to get powers, but enough that in, like, the real world, you're just gonna get bit by a radioactive spider and have cancer kind of situation.
Yeah.
Like, you're getting halfway.
So, like, she came back at this point, and she knows what has to be done, and she picks him up, and she's flying him up into the clouds, and he's bleeding, and his skin is scorched, and he looks up at her, and she just says, "I've got you." And I was like, that is a great touchstone moment, because she's, like, angry at everybody except this guy, the one that saved her.
And it didn't feel forced.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
There were no, like, lines as, like, "Hey, can you help me like I helped you," or anything like that. It was a very natural, like, this is the only person that's shown me kindness in the last umpteen years of my life.
Yeah.
and he's dying in front of me. I'm going to do something even though I don't want to. Or I shouldn't say don't want to, but at the time, she was definitely not a fan of people.
Yeah. And when I say like little flirty moments, I don't mean that, I don't think there was any like growing like relationship between them. But like, he was the only one she liked. He was the only one that like she legitimately even smiled at. Like, she didn't smile at Bruce, you know what I mean? So like, she would have like those little moments, those like little humanizing moments, but it would only be like with him, you know what I mean? Because like, he's the one that saved her. He's the one that got her out of the prison. It was just like really nice, and like, yeah, nothing felt forced in the relationships between them. Like, even Bruce just deciding to be Batman again didn't really feel forced. I liked that what made him change his mind was Alfred. When he brought up Alfred, and he was like, you know, there are some things that are always the same no matter what timeline we're in. My Bruce had an Alfred too. And like, that kind of like started putting him back on track. But then the other little moment that I really liked is Kara, Barry, and Barry were down in the Batcave talking about like, what do they do? No, they were in the dining room talking about what to do next. And then it just cuts to Keaton. No lines, no nothing. He has that freaking fish hook from Batman Returns, and he's stitching up his arm. And then he just looks in the mirror, and he gets that smirk, like, yeah, I've missed this. Like, that was cool.
And that was definitely a two-folded thing. Like, one, that was definitely Keaton.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that was Keaton just like, I'm Batman again.
Yeah.
But in the narrative, it was Batman because he wasn't Batman at that point. He was Batman.
Yeah.
And at that point, he became him again. But I think that was also the moment he realized he couldn't do both. He couldn't have that normal life and also still be Batman again. And I think he made a decision. Like, going into that final battle, it was stacked against him.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't care if you're a huge Batman Keaton fan or not. Like, he's old. Batman's old in this universe. He's not physically fit. He hasn't been doing it. And like, yeah, they gave him credit where credit's due. He had the whole Russian thing. But when you get to the actual fight where he's actually fighting superhumans and aliens and stuff he didn't interact with in the movies,
he was out of his element for that one.
But he was still actively causing issues. Like, he was missiling people. And like, they even go, you know, he attacks a ship, and the ship had a shield, so instead of him just dying, he decided to ram the ship into the other ship. And like, that was cool, but it was the second take for him that was far better. When he gets to solo a Kryptonian, and someone said it to him that it was like an Arkham game.
An Arkham boss fight.
Yeah, like just the way he's fighting and moving around him. Because again, he's not dumb. Yeah. He's not going to beat a Kryptonian. He's just not. Not this Batman, at least. Yeah. But he's putting bombs on the dude, spinning around.
Well, and like, he would push off and then use the grapple gun to pull him back and then plant another bomb and come off. And yeah, like, I can totally see like some dudes, so I forget who it was that told me that it was like an Arkham video game boss fight. And it kind of was. But like you said, well, the Arkham game would have taken 10 times longer, but that's because we're not Batman.
Exactly.
But yeah, it definitely had like that feel of, this is how I'm going down. And from the first episode of Ralph World, my one theory was correct, that yeah, he dies in this. And I didn't hate it. Like, it's my Batman. It's my favorite Batman. I'm not even going to try and hide anything about that. And like, some people would be upset that like their guy died, but I don't. I'm not upset about that. And I think because, one, it wasn't like a cheap death. You know what I mean?
The first one was.
Yeah, but it was meant to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for the, like, I don't know, 5 minutes we had between realizing he was about to come back anyway, I was a little upset.
Yeah.
Like, not enough to, oh, I hate this movie now or anything, but enough to be like, really? Keaton's going to go out just kamikaze?
Yeah.
And then he really didn't even do that much with destroying the ship either. But having him face a Kryptonian, which I guess is still kind of the same thing. He knew he wasn't going to win that fight. But I think it was a rocky moment. Like, it's not that Batman could beat this Kryptonian. It's that this Batman, at his age and his experience, still took on a Kryptonian and put him down first. Didn't kill him. But Batman was not the first one on the ground. And I think that was why the scene was so acceptable, at least for me, to send Keaton's Batman off. Like, he still beat him. He beat the crap out of the Kryptonian. He put a bunch of bombs on him. And then it was a really cool shot. As the dude's walking towards Keaton, Keaton stands up ready to go. Dude goes down. Keaton has like a second of standing, and then he's done.
He goes down on his knees, and then he falls over, and then like Barry catches him, and he says, and like that was like one of that moment that we were talking about before, that Barry says, "I can't save you, can I?" And Keaton Batman is basically like, "You did, like, I'm fine with this, thank you. No, like, I can't bring you back." And he says, "You already did. I'm fine with this." And some people have taken that to mean that Batman knew he had died before. But I think people are missing that was like, I can't bring you back, can I? You already did. He was talking about him as Batman, as a hero. Like, some people are misconstruing that, thinking that somehow Batman knew he had died before and Barry brought him back. And I'm like, I don't believe that's what's happening there.
I can believe that Batman had sort of an inkling that something like that happened, because Barry just randomly being like, "Hey, that ship has a shield, don't shoot that ship." I can understand that Batman was like, okay.
And then when he said, "I can't bring you," like, okay, yeah.
Like, I can see that.
Especially since he was the one to explain the multiverse theory to him in the first place,
But I think when he says the line, it 100% more so comes from, like, Batman has been dead. You brought Batman back. Thank you.
Yeah. And I have absolutely no problem with the way that he went out in this movie. Mainly because it was cool. It looked cool. The movie, despite the box office, is not a bad movie. And let's be honest, he's not going to be Batman again anyway. No. Like, this was his final hurrah.
Oh, yeah. And even with this, I'm sure the fighting was not Keaton.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No, like anytime he was in the suit, there was no doubt that there was a body double for a lot of the stuff. But I don't have a problem with that.
That's time. You can't control that. Keaton's going to get old, and they pushed off the movie for like 30 years. But
which brings us to the final cameo. That I had, because I had avoided all spoilers, I did not anticipate. I did not expect. Not even sure I really wanted it. But when Barry comes out of the courthouse at the end after, getting his dad off of the charges.
Everything's been fixed.
And the phone rings and it's Bruce. And Bruce is saying, "Barry, good job. I'm proud of you, blah, 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 blah." I said to you, that's not Ben. That's not Affleck. Like, and you said, "Is it Keaton?" And I said, "I don't know." And then Barry's like, "Who the F are you?"
Nah, he didn't even pick up on that. I had to tell him that afterwards. And by that, or him, I mean Mac. He didn't catch the, "Who the F are you?" When Batfleck, no. When Clooney walked out of the car, man.
Oh my gosh.
I gotta say, that was phenomenal choicing.
But
like,
you remember, like, he showed up, and I am not one to typically be very vocal in a movie theater. I think I shouted, like, full on, "Clooney!"
Oh, you did. Yeah, dude, that's probably the first cameo that has legitimately gotten me in years. I was fully not expecting that. Like, Nicolas Cage I wasn't expecting, but when he showed up, I was like, that tracks. Like, I knew he was almost Superman in a movie. It was kind of cool that he was in it. But Clooney showing up genuinely caught me so off guard. Because I was like, all right, it might be Keaton. It might be Batfleck. Heck, they might get crazy. What if it's Christian Bale in this?
Or Patterson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, this could get crazy. And then Clooney was like, okay, all right. I'm pretty sure Clooney hated this character.
It was on the drive home that he told me Ezra dropped an F-bomb.
Yeah.
Because I completely missed that, because I think in my head I was saying pretty much the same thing. But yeah, when he showed up, see, to me, that was the sure sign that everything had been reset. That, like, you know, the last time we saw Ben Affleck in the movie was the last time we were going to see Ben Affleck as Batman. Because even if the DCEU continued, there's no going back from a change like that. But then, like, you have to ask yourself the question, well, how would they still play this off? Like, I really think that if the DCEU would have continued, and this wasn't like the end and they didn't know that the DCU was coming over, like maybe that was one of the reshoots, I don't know. But I feel like if it would have carried over, it would have been Keaton in the limo. Because I still swear that, like, hearing that voice, I still think he did the voiceover on the phone. And I think they kept that, or if that is true, they did that just to, like, put you off. So, like, Clooney literally came out of nowhere when he showed up.
Well, I did read a few things, because I didn't want to get too into it, that I believe they shot 3 endings to the movie.
Oh.
That the Clooney ending wasn't planned. It was something that happened kind of later, because I don't know, for whatever reason. But the big one that I saw that they pretty sure shot was everyone showed up at the end. Wonder Woman, Superman, Henry Cavill Superman.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And Keaton and Supergirl. Like, they were all supposed to show up at the end.
Like that was the new Justice League moving forward or something?
I don't know about that. I just know, like, they were going to show up.
Okay.
I don't know how that would have played. I don't even know how they would have interacted. I just know whatever happens after the courtroom, that scene changed a couple times.
Okay, what was the second one?
I don't remember.
What was the other one? Okay.
I don't think it held much value to me in my head.
Okay. No, because I am genuinely curious, like, how they would have moved forward with that. And I'm curious also if, because they put this movie off, because they canceled Batgirl, if Batgirl was supposed to come out of this, because Keaton was in Batgirl, and he was kind of like that mentor position, like almost a Batman Beyond type thing, that it does make me wonder now, if Keaton was originally supposed to be in that limo, if he showed up in the end, and if Flash would have premiered when it was supposed to, if that would have led right into Batgirl, where he's kind of like, I'm too old for this, and then, like, he recruits Barbara and starts training her, sort of like how he did with McGillis in Batman Beyond. So, yeah, I'm kind of curious how that all would have connected together.
It's gone now.
And now we have Blue Beetle coming up next. And they have, I don't know if you heard this, but they've changed their tune a little bit. And I know why they're saying this, but I kind of suspected this, that they've officially said that Blue Beetle is a DCU character. They are going to carry him over into the DCU movies. And I think they're kind of doing that to get people in to see it because they don't want another flop. Which, do you think the general audience is going to care about that?
Blue Beetle?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Because,
like, I legitimately question, if you're not on Twitter, and you shouldn't be. Nobody should be on Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, if you're not paying attention to, like, the pop culture zeitgeist to this level that we do general audiences even know that there's a new regime? Do general audiences even know that Gunn has made this announcement and that there's going to be this whole company-wide reboot that takes place in 2025?
Oh, dude, there's people who don't even know the difference between DC and the MCU.
That's very true, because, like, the reason I question that is because when the first Venom movie came out, speaking of the MCU, when the first Venom movie came out,
Well, I guess it's Sony.
I took a date to go see Venom,
Mm-hmm.
and we were talking about it, and she legitimately did not know this was not an MCU movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the first thing that made me go, oh yeah, not everybody is as deep into this as I am. So keeping that in mind, like, she thought like Venom was part of the MCU because it's a Marvel movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why wouldn't it be? And that was the thing that's making me wonder, do people even know what's going on behind the scenes? Do they care? Or do they just not go to the Warner Brothers DC movies because they don't have the best track record going all the way back to Man of Steel?
Yeah. Like, I think it's both. I think you have people that have very loosely followed the MCU. Just the movies, not comics, not behind the scenes. Just like, these are fun superhero movies, and I'm watching them.
Yes.
But I don't know anyone that does that with DC. And I'm bringing that up because that's the casual viewer to me. For the MCU movies, the casual viewer is the one that's like, oh yeah, I saw Endgame. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then you ask them a question, they're like, they thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then there is no casual viewership for the DCEU.
No.
DCEU. Like, there's us who, I mean, let's be honest, begrudgingly watch more movies than we should with these guys.
Yeah.
And, like, you're not even a big MCU fan right now. I keep up with the MCU, but you don't. So even between us, we're not even a good track record for these movies.
Yeah, because I'm not, and the reason I haven't followed the MCU is, I think I've mentioned this before, is I'm just not a Marvel guy. Like, I'm not going to sit here and bag on Marvel. I have nothing against Marvel. It's just their characters, their heroes, with very few exception, like Cap and Spider-Man, Ghost Rider, Silver Surfer, like a lot of the cosmic ones, like, I can get into that, but that's not who's in these movies anymore, especially after Endgame, where, like, Thor is gone.
Thor's not gone.
I thought he was gone. No, I thought, like, Hemsworth, like, just totally stepped out of the role.
If he did, that's extremely recent.
Okay. Well, Cap is gone. Stark is gone. Iron Man is gone. Black Widow is gone. Is Hawkeye gone? Like, after his series, is he out and, like, Haley is taking over?
I don't know. I don't think they know. But I mean, like, he's finally deaf now, so
Okay.
I don't know if that's going to, like, reinvigorate his character, because I know a lot of people have been complaining about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's even happening with Spidey at this point after No Way Home? Short version, Cliff Note. This isn't a Spidey
No, I understand.
episode. But it's like,
So there are no current Spider-Man 4 plans?
no, but like, is he even still a part of the MCU, or did Sony take him back?
We don't know that yet.
Because
to my knowledge, there's a deal right now that Spider-Man is still in the MCU.
Okay.
But there are no plans for Spider-Man 4. Holland has even come out and said, unless there is a script that they can pen that is on par with the third movie, I'm not just going to make a fourth one.
Yeah.
Which I get. Like, your third movie brought the 3 live-action Spider-Men together. Whether you think the movie's great or not, that in and of itself is a big deal.
Yeah.
Because you're spanning a lot of years with that, and not to mention bringing people back for a character who arguably no one's really even asking to see again.
Yeah.
Like, it was a big deal for everything. And then, where do you go from that? Because that movie had one of the best MCU villains I've seen thus far. And that is solely because he wasn't an MCU villain. And Green
Talking
Goblin.
about Defoe as
Oh,
the
yeah.
Goblin, yeah.
Oh my God, Defoe is phenomenal.
Well, and that
He's the defriend.
that is that kind of goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning, way at the beginning of this episode, that like DC is always following the last big thing. And if if the Flash movie would have come out when it was supposed to, before No Way Home, they could have said we did it first. But now it just looks like, whether it's a bad copy or not, it just looks like they're chasing No Way Home. But only in a worse way, because there was zero interaction from all of those cameos. Like we said at the beginning, if they would have come out and Nicolas Cage would have actually been in the Superman suit, we're not going to go into the whole story of why Cage was Superman. You can find many videos about that on YouTube. You may even already know the story. But like when he was in the Superman suit with that long hair and everything, like I feel like he should have all of those characters that they just showed on other Earths that were crashing into each other. Like there should have been interaction rather than just seeing them as like, you know, department store window dressing.
Yeah.
Like that was, if I have one complaint that's not the CGI, it's that they had all those cameos but didn't do anything with them. There was a lot of heated emotions about seeing George Reeves, about seeing Adam West, because you do see Adam West Batman in this, and about seeing Christopher Reeve in this, because those actors have passed. And Christopher Reeve had the accident that paralyzed him, and that led to his death. George Reeves, the Superman, he committed suicide. And then Adam West, Batman, passed away, I think it was only like maybe 5 years ago, 3 or 4, 3.
I think it was right before COVID, somewhere in there.
And yeah, because it was like right before Crisis on Infinite Earths too. That's why he wasn't in the cameo, but Burt Ward was. What do you think about that? Because I think getting upset about that, there's a couple of things to consider here. First of all, they would have had to have gotten the estate's permission to do that, because if they had done that without getting the permission of those estates and having them sign off, there would have been immediate hell to pay as soon as that movie came on the big screen and people realized what was happening. But also, I feel like getting upset about bringing back actors through CGI, I feel like that ship has sailed, because they've been doing it for years.
I'm sort of 50-50 with it.
Okay.
Doing it in practice in and of itself, I think is okay, because people age. Even if the person's not dead, like Mark Hamill in Star Wars, he's not going to look like Luke anymore.
Right.
But if you recast him, people are going to be upset, because it's like, why would you recast a character when the actor's still alive?
Yeah.
Well, it's because the actor can't play a character when we're basing the movie off of the previous one.
So then they end up de-aging him like they did in The Mandalorian.
I think you have to do it respectfully. Like, if Christopher Reeve's Superman was really prevalent in this movie, like Keaton was, but it was CG the whole time, that would make me upset.
Yes.
Because you're artificially giving him a performance that he didn't, in any way, shape, or form, get to be a part of.
Right.
But if you're doing like what they did, it's just pretty much a still image. That's fine. Like, that's more paying homage to it than anything.
That's what I thought too, especially when like the first Earth that you see, when you see the multiverse, it started with George Reeves as, you know, the black and white Superman, and he was even in like a black and white world. And then in the corner you see Batman doing the Bat-2C from like the 66, and then it pans up and you see Christopher Reeve. That was totally an homage timeline of Warner movies, of this is where we started, this is where we are. And I would have expected, and I agree with everything you said, I would have expected people would have been more upset about this during Rogue One, when there was a completely CGI Grand Moff Tarkin giving a performance. It wasn't just that he was there, like at the end of Revenge of the Sith. He gave a performance. There was a body double that like had the motion capture dots on him, and then they CG'd, I can't remember the actor's name who played Tarkin. Peter Cushing. They CG'd Peter Cushing over top of him, and it was like he just gave a full-on performance. It wasn't just that he was there. Like, I would have expected people to be more upset about that than what happened in this movie.
But even with that, it wasn't a substantial role in the movie. Like, it was an important role.
Right.
But I think...
He had like maybe 3 scenes.
Yeah, you take it out, I think collectively it's a 4 or 5 minute amount of screen time in the movie.
Okay.
But that's just what I mean. If you were... With where we're at, we can go back and make movies or remake movies or continue movies from where they stop. And you're gonna have to either find an explanation as to why characters aren't there anymore because the actors are dead, or you're going to have to somehow bring them forward into this movie. And recasting them is not always an option. Because, like, if you looked at me and you were like, hey, the next Indiana Jones movie, Harrison Ford isn't in it, but we hired this new guy to play Indiana Jones, I'm not seeing that movie. Like, Harrison Ford is Indiana Jones, and he's not dead. I don't want to see someone else's Indiana Jones. If Harrison Ford dies and, like, it's 10 years from now because...
Yeah, we talked about this,
like, this one's coming out now, that's fine. Like, recast it, that's fine. Make new ones. I genuinely just think it comes down to respect.
Yes.
If you want to bring a character back because they were important in the story and they will still be there in this story, then yes, bring them back, use CG, be respectful, like don't have it look like garbage and they're doing something dumb.
Yeah.
Just have them come back, say some lines, make it look good, great, move on.
Because the one time they did this that even I was like, this is wrong, they shouldn't have done this, things should have been handled differently, was when Carrie Fisher passed away before filming Rise of Skywalker even started. First of all, they should have gone back and redone the ending of The Last Jedi so that Leia passed and Luke continued forward. But then, like, all of her, like, she was so inconsequential into the movie because they were working around the restraints of old footage that it was like, this is ghoulish, this is crap, this is nothing. Like, you could have taken her out of the movie. She had absolutely nothing to do with what was actually going on. She was not important to the movie at all. Like, that was the lack of respect that I think you're talking about.
Like, if the character's role in a movie is inconsequential and they die, it sucks to say this, but the better alternative is to write them out of the movie.
Yeah.
Like, I understand it's Princess Leia. Like, she is one of the 3 most iconic characters from the series.
Yeah.
I get that she needed to be in the movie somewhere. Then you, like, start it with her. Give her the beginning. Have her open the movie. Whatever. But then, like, she dies. She's off planet. She is removed from the story because I don't want to keep cutting back to her just because it's Carrie Fisher to see her interact with someone and then go back to the plot.
Saying generic lines from footage that ended up on the editing room floor that, like, could have been placed into any scene, any dialogue, anything. Yeah, no, like that one was the one that upset me.
But her in Rogue One, on the flip side of that,
well, that was just the aging.
But but I was completely fine with that. Like, if that's what you're going to do, you're going to CGI her into the end of the movie because she's the one that starts the next movie.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's a scene that sets up what's coming next without making it seem like, well, Carrie Fisher is really important. No, she's not. We did not need her for this scene. Do CG, it's fine.
Yeah. So let's wrap up. Because no, I'm being serious here. Like, for me, I think, getting back to The Flash, the whole point of this one, for me, I understand why people aren't seeing it. I think it's a shame because I do think this is a good movie. I think it's a fun movie. I think you'll laugh. And it has that, like, emotional core that a lot, mainly Barry and his family, that you don't get a lot in action movies anymore. Like, a lot of movies, action movies, comic book movies, whatever, just focus on the action, focus on getting the plot forward. I felt like everything that happened in this was earned. There was nothing that really happened out of convenience. Like, you could argue that Barry being able to get into the NASA database through the Bat computer is convenience, but let's be honest, Batman has access to NASA. Like, that's like, that didn't even, I didn't even bat an eye at that. Like, I was like, well, why wouldn't he?
Yeah.
So, like, there's so many movies that happen now, like Dungeons and Dragons, for example, was a prime example of, like, where things just happen conveniently because the plot needed it to. I feel like everything that happened in this movie was worked towards and earned in universe. Like, nothing came easy to them. And I do think this is a good movie. And I think history will be kinder to this movie once it hits streaming and more eyes get on it. that it's going to be one of those ones that's like, hey, this is really good. Too bad I didn't see it in the theaters, but I have it on Max now. I'll watch it like 4 or 5 times this year. What do you think?
I think when it's all said and done, I think The Flash is a fun movie.
Yes.
Which I don't say that lightly. There aren't many fun movies anymore. Like, either movies are just really serious or it's the next installment to this 15-year evolution of a story. And I'm not saying either of those are bad. They're just, you need to commit to them. You need to pay attention. This was just fun.
Yes.
Like, it was Flash, it was Batman. Like, you just had people interacting and doing things, and it had heart. It had enough for you to latch on to. CGI sucked. It did. I completely agree with everyone who's saying that. But...
And I still stand by what I said. I think it was... I do think they were going for a different point of view, but I think they also used that as an excuse to save money on it.
No, and that wouldn't surprise me. I think it's worth a watch, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I think it's worth sitting down, having fun with it. Don't go into it like, oh, I wonder what's going to come next or what happened before this. Like, just sit down and watch a self-contained superhero story.
Yeah.
And it's fun. That's all you really need. If you're a fan of Keaton's Batman, it's a great send-off. If you're not a fan of Keaton's Batman, it's a fun Batman to have in the movie. Like, he just does bits that are entertaining and you laugh and it's fun. And that's just the biggest compliment I can give this movie coming out of the DCEU is that it's a fun movie.
The biggest fault that it has, I feel, for everything they did, for everything they tried to do, for all of the cameos, whether real or CG, there was nothing groundbreaking about this. There was nothing that, other than maybe this version of how the Speed Force works, but there was really nothing in this movie that I was like, I've never seen that before. It was more like, oh, I really like how they're doing this in this movie. Meaning the heat vision, meaning the Speed Force, meaning just even... Like, I loved personally that when Batman dropped and he spread the cape to, like, do the wings, even though it wasn't as, like, you know, the big rigid harness that he had in Batman Returns, it still had that shape. Like, there were callbacks to it. But there was nothing really groundbreaking about this. And I think that is probably its biggest fault. That with everything they were doing, there was nothing that's going to make you go, that's the reason to see this movie.
It's funny you say that, because like I think that is a poor way to think about movies, and I think it's solely a byproduct of the MCU.
Really?
That you're looking for these big moments or this big thing with the movie to draw you in when, like, it's just a fun movie.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of miss movies that are just, you sit down, you watch them, you have fun, you move on.
No. I completely understand what you're saying, but I just feel like if you're going to do something this big, say it's the end of an era, bring Keaton back, like, there should be something that makes it stand out, just by the very nature of the movie that it is. I do agree with you that, like, there aren't a lot of movies like this. This is why I like the Suicide Squad, the second one. Like, because it is just a fun movie where you can just sit there. It has, like, emotional connection between some of the team. It has humor, a lot of violence.
Disconnected.
Yeah, and I had the same feeling watching Flash as I did with the Suicide Squad. It's funny you say it's self-contained, because I said that on the way home, and you were like, no, man, you would have had to have seen a lot of movies to understand everything that's going on in this.
It's the least self-contained story I've seen in a while, because technically speaking, you need to watch some movies since 1989 to fully understand, but realistically, you can sit down and watch this movie and genuinely not miss a beat of what's happening.
All right, everybody. Thank you for bearing with us. Thank you for listening this long.
With us?
Thank you for listening this long. I apologize for that. Not sure what the next episode is going to be about, because we were pretty much focused on this after having seen the movie. We knew we wanted to talk about it. We weren't even really sure if this was going to be a subject, but because of how it's doing, because nobody has seen it, like, we really wanted to explore, like, what happened with this. And I don't believe there's any one thing you can look at and say, this is why it's flopping. I think it's like the perfect storm of everything that could go wrong did go wrong.
And we didn't even touch on what's happening outside of the movie with Ezra Miller, which we're not going to get into, but was a major, major issue for a lot of people going into this movie.
It was. Like, Ezra, from what I understand, has gone to court for a lot of these issues and been cleared from a lot of them. But I think there's still a lot of, well, was he really cleared, or was this Warner Brothers just throwing money at a problem to make it go away? So I do think there's a lot of that as well. But yeah, we didn't really want to get into that part. But thank you, everybody. Remember to come back next week. Talk to you later.
Ralph World.